Daniel and I stood in front of our new house, holding hands. The bright sun was shining, and a light breeze rustled the leaves on the trees along the quiet street. I can't believe it finally happened. Daniel smiled, looking at the cozy house with blue shutters. Yes, a new house, a new life, I confirmed, feeling a mixture of joy and slight anxiety. We went inside, and the scent of fresh paint mingled with the smell of wood. A spacious living room with a fireplace, a bright kitchen with a large window overlooking the park. "Look, what a perfect spot for breakfast," Daniel said, pointing to the nook by the window. "Ideal for morning coffee," I agreed, imagining sunny mornings with a book in hand. We began unpacking boxes, putting things in their places. Daniel picked up an old framed photograph. "Remember this moment?" he asked, showing the picture from our wedding. "It feels like it was just yesterday," I smiled, recalling that happy day. In the evening, we settled on the floor among the boxes with pizza and glasses of wine. "To our new beginning," Daniel said, raising his glass. "To us," I replied, feeling warmth spreading through my body. Outside, lights began to come on and soft music drifted from a neighboring house. I looked at Daniel. "Do you think it'll be different here?" I asked quietly. "I'm sure of it. A new place, new opportunities. We'll make it," he reassured me with a smile. I nodded, hoping that would be the case. The house seemed perfect, and ahead of us lay a life full of promise. A few weeks later, during dinner, Daniel looked up from his plate and said thoughtfully, "Emily, I need to talk to you." "Sounds serious," I smiled, setting my fork aside. "What's going on?" "My nephew Ethan got accepted into a university nearby. He asked if he could stay with us for a while until he finds his own place." Ethan, I remember him as just a little boy at family gatherings. I tried to recall his face. "Of course, let him come. It will be nice to have family nearby." Daniel sighed with relief. "I knew you'd understand. He'll be arriving next week." The day Ethan arrived was sunny. I stood on the porch as a car pulled up. A tall young man with dark hair and bright eyes got out. "Aunt Emily?" He smiled, approaching me with a suitcase in hand. "Just Emily," I corrected, returning the smile. "Welcome." Daniel came out of the house and hugged his nephew. "Ethan, it's good to see you. How was the trip?" "Everything was great. Thank you for having me." We helped him bring his things to the guest room on the second floor. I noticed a guitar case among his belongings. "Do you play the guitar?" I asked. "Yes, a little." "It's my hobby," he replied, a bit embarrassed. "Emily is into music too," Daniel chimed in. "Maybe you two could play together sometime." "That would be great," Ethan said, looking at me with interest. In the evening, we gathered around the table. The conversation flowed easily, and I was surprised at how quickly Ethan fit into our lives. "Why did you choose this university?" I asked. "They have a strong art program," he explained. "I want to grow in that direction." "Emily is an artist too," Daniel added again. "Oh, really?" Ethan turned to me. "What do you create?" "A bit of everything. Lately I've been into watercolor," I replied. "I like watercolor for its unpredictability," Ethan said. "Could you show me your work sometime?" "Of course. We can have a little exhibition one day." The evening passed quickly. Before bed, I stopped by the door of the guest room. "Ethan, if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask," I said. "Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate your kindness." I nodded and went to my room, feeling a bit tired. But deep down, I had a sense that with Ethan's arrival, our lives were about to change. And although I couldn't predict what that change would be, I was curious to see what tomorrow would bring. Several weeks had passed since Ethan moved in with us. The house was filled with new energy, laughter, music, and conversations. One evening, I heard the sound of a guitar coming from the living room. Intrigued, I went downstairs. "Ethan, is that you playing?" I asked, peeking into the room. He was sitting on the sofa with the guitar in his hands and looked up. Yes, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. It's beautiful. What are you playing? It's my own composition, he replied with a slight smile. Still working on it. Mind if I join? I pointed to the piano in the corner. Of course, that would be great. We spent several hours improvising and discussing music. I was surprised at how easy and natural it felt to communicate with him. You have real talent, I noted when we took a break. Thank you, but I'm nowhere near your level. Ethan replied modestly. Don't be so hard on yourself. Your music is full of emotion. He looked at me with warmth in his eyes. Do you really think so? Absolutely, I confirmed. From then on, our musical evenings became a tradition. One night after dinner, when Daniel was delayed at work, Ethan offered to show me his latest sketches. These are impressive, I said, examining his drawings. You're not just a musician, but an artist, too. Art is my way of expressing myself, he explained. And what have you been working on lately? To be honest, I've been in a bit of a creative slump, I admitted. But your inspiration seems to be contagious. Maybe we could try creating something together? Ethan suggested. Interesting idea. Let's give it a shot. We began a collaborative project. He composed music, and I painted under its influence. It was a new and exciting experience. One day, while we were working in the garden, Ethan paused and looked at me intently. Emily, I'm glad we're spending so much time together. It really means a lot to me. I felt the warmth of his words. I'm glad too, Ethan. You've brought something special into our home. At that moment, there was an understanding between us that was difficult to describe in words. It wasn't just friendship or a family bond. It was something deeper and more complex. Emily, he said quietly, but before he could continue, the sound of the front door opening interrupted him. I'm home, Daniel called from the hallway. We exchanged quick glances and returned to what we were doing. That night, lying in bed, I reflected on what had happened. What were these feelings that were beginning to emerge? It was wrong, but I couldn't deny that Ethan had become more to me than just my husband's nephew. I decided that I needed to be cautious and maintain some distance, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be easy. One evening, while Daniel was still at work, Ethan knocked on the door of my studio where I was painting. Emily, I have 2 tickets to a concert at a local music club. Would you like to join me? He asked, hope evident in his voice. I looked up from the canvas. Tonight? I clarified, a bit surprised by the invitation. Yes, there's a band I've been wanting to see for a while. I think you might like them too. I hesitated for a moment. The evening promised to be ordinary and uneventful. Why not make it a bit different? Sounds interesting. I don't think Daniel would mind, I replied with a smile. An hour later, we were walking through the bustling city streets. The shop lights, the sound of cars, and the laughter of passers-by created a special atmosphere. The music club turned out to be a small but cozy place with dim lighting and colorful posters on the walls. It's so atmospheric here, I noted, looking around. I knew you'd like it, Ethan said, looking pleased. We took seats near the stage. As the band started playing, I felt the music sink in, stirring a range of emotions. This is amazing. I leaned over to Ethan to be heard over the music. I'm glad you're enjoying it, he replied, smiling. During one of the slower songs, the room dimmed and soft melodies filled the space. At some point, our hands ended up close together on the table. A brief touch made me startle. I looked at Ethan, and our eyes met. There was something in his gaze that made my heart beat faster. Emily? He said quietly, but then quickly looked away. I'm sorry. It's okay, I quickly assured him, though I felt a slight embarrassment myself. After the concert, we stepped outside. The night air was refreshing after the stuffy room. Thank you for a wonderful evening, I said, trying to bring the conversation back to a normal tone. I should be the one thanking you for the company, Ethan replied. I haven't felt this light in a long time. We walked slowly down the street, discussing the music and sharing impressions. The conversation was easygoing, yet there was an underlying tension. I feel like we've known each other for much longer, Ethan admitted. Yes, it's a strange feeling, I agreed. But maybe it's because of our shared interests. Maybe, he smiled, though a shadow of thoughtfulness passed through his eyes. When we reached the house, Ethan stopped. Emily, I'm glad you agreed to come with me. I am too, Ethan. It was great. We went inside and I felt tired after the long day. I think I'll head to bed, I said. Good night. Good night, Emily. In my room, I lingered by the window, gazing at the stars. The evening had been unusual, and I couldn't shake the thoughts of that fleeting moment in the club. What was it? An accident or something more? I decided to set these thoughts aside, hoping that the morning would bring clarity. The days following that evening at the music club turned into a tangled web of thoughts and emotions. I tried to occupy myself with everyday tasks, making breakfast, working in the garden, but I kept catching myself thinking about Ethan. One morning, as I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, I heard Ethan coming downstairs. Good morning, Emily, he greeted me, pouring himself some juice. Good morning, I replied, trying to sound casual. A pause hung between us. I felt the need to fill the silence. How are your classes at the university going? Everything's great. The professors are inspiring, lots of new ideas. He smiled. By the way, a group of us students is planning to visit an art exhibition. Would you like to join us? I hesitated. On one hand, I wanted to go, but on the other, I knew it might only deepen my doubts. Sounds interesting, but I have a lot to do, I answered evasively. I understand. Let me know if you change your mind. At that moment, Daniel walked in, cheerfully whistling a tune. Hey everyone, any plans for today? I'm heading to the university, Ethan said, grabbing his backpack. See you tonight. After he left, Daniel came over and put his arm around my shoulders. How are you, sweetheart? You look a little tired. I'm fine, just thinking a lot about a new project, I lied. Maybe we could have dinner out tonight? It might help you unwind. Good idea, I agreed, hoping a change of scenery would help clear my mind. Throughout the day, I tried to focus on painting, but the brush wouldn't cooperate. Images blurred and the colors mixed into chaotic strokes. Finally, setting the tools aside, I stepped outside. The cool breeze was refreshing, but it didn't bring any relief. I knew that my feelings for Ethan were crossing the line. My marriage to Daniel was steady and reliable, but somewhere along the way, we had lost that spark we once had. Ethan, on the other hand, brought a sense of novelty and inspiration into my life. In the evening, sitting in the restaurant with Daniel, I tried to be an attentive listener. A funny thing happened at work today, he was saying, but I found myself unable to fully concentrate. Sorry, what did you say? I asked, realizing I had missed his story. Emily, are you sure you're okay? Daniel looked at me with concern. Yes, just a bit tired. I tried to smile. He took my hand. If something's bothering you, you can tell me. Everything's fine, really, I assured him. As we headed home, I felt a heaviness in my heart. I needed to sort out my feelings and make a decision. But how could I, when my heart and mind were pulling me in opposite directions? When we walked into the house, we found Ethan at the piano. He looked up and, seeing us, stood. Good evening. I hope I'm not disturbing you. No, of course not, Daniel replied. We were just about to relax. I'll go to my room, Ethan said, heading towards the stairs. I watched him until he disappeared from view. Inside me, a struggle was raging between duty and desire. I realized that any further hesitation would only worsen the situation. A decision needed to be made before the consequences became irreversible. Daniel suggested spending the weekend out of town to get away from the city bustle and spend some time together. He booked a cozy cabin by the lake, surrounded by forest. That's a great idea, I said, trying to sound cheerful. A bit of fresh air will do us good. I agree, Ethan added. I haven't been out in nature for a while. On Saturday morning, we packed the car and set off. The drive was scenic: green fields, rolling hills, and a crystal clear sky. When we arrived, we were captivated by the beauty of the surrounding nature. "This place is stunning," I marveled as I got out of the car. "I'm glad you like it." Daniel smiled. "Let's unpack and then go for a walk." The day passed peacefully. We prepared lunch together, took a walk in the forest, and enjoyed the quiet. But despite my efforts to relax, my feelings for Ethan only grew stronger. I noticed every little thing: how he laughed, how he looked thoughtfully at the water, how the wind ruffled his hair. In the evening, Daniel was tired after the long walk and decided to stay in the cabin to read. "I think I'll rest for a bit," he said, settling into an armchair. "You two can go for a walk without me." "All right," Ethan said. "Emily, would you like to take a walk to the lake?" "With pleasure," I agreed, though my heart started to beat faster. We walked along the path illuminated by the moonlight. The lake's water was calm, reflecting the stars. "It's so beautiful here at night," Ethan said softly. "Yes, it's like another world," I agreed. We stopped by the shore, listening to the rustling of the water. For a while, we stood in silence, lost in our thoughts. "Emily, can I be honest?" Ethan broke the silence. I sensed the tension in his voice. "Of course," I replied, trying to stay composed. "Since I arrived, you've become more than just a relative to me. I feel there is a special connection between us." I froze, not knowing what to say. The words stuck in my throat. "Ethan," I began, but he continued. "I understand that it's complicated and perhaps wrong, but I can't ignore these feelings." I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. "I feel it too," I admitted quietly. "But we need to be careful." He nodded, looking at the water. "I don't want to hurt you or Daniel. I just wanted you to know." "Thank you for your honesty," I said. "We need to figure out what to do next." We stood there for a while longer until the cool wind reminded us of the late hour. "It's time to go back," I suggested. "Yes, you're right," Ethan agreed. On the way back, we walked in silence, but the tension between us was palpable. I knew that this conversation had changed everything. Inside, a storm of emotions raged, and I didn't know how to deal with it. When we returned to the cabin, Daniel was already asleep. I wished Ethan good night and went to my room. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, trying to find a way out of the situation. The answers didn't come, and only anxiety filled my heart. The day began with the usual morning hustle. Daniel was rushing to get ready for a meeting, Ethan was preparing for his university classes, and I was making breakfast. "I'll be back late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner," Daniel said, kissing me on the cheek. "I have an important meeting with clients in another city." "All right. Good luck," I replied, seeing him out the door. After he left, the house felt unusually quiet. Ethan came downstairs holding a map. "Emily, I don't have any classes today. I was thinking maybe we could take a trip to a nearby town. There's a contemporary art exhibition going on." I considered it. I didn't want to stay home alone, and the idea of visiting the exhibition seemed appealing. "Why not?" "It's a great opportunity to get inspired," I agreed. We drove off, enjoying the scenery outside the window. The conversation flowed easily as we discussed art, music, and shared dreams and plans. "I heard there's an old bookstore in this town," Ethan remarked. "Maybe we could stop by after the exhibition?" "I'd love that. I adore places like that." I smiled. When we arrived, we immersed ourselves in the creative atmosphere. Paintings, sculptures, installations, everything evoked delight and inspiration. "This piece reminds me of your watercolors," Ethan said, pointing to one of the paintings. "Really? Maybe I should try something in this style," I replied thoughtfully. After the exhibition, we strolled through the town's narrow streets, enjoying the architecture and the ambiance. Suddenly, the sky clouded over and a heavy rain began to pour. "Let's run there." Ethan pointed to a small cafe with a bright sign. We dashed inside, laughing and shaking off the raindrops. The cafe was cozy, with soft lighting and quiet music in the background. Looks like the rain is going to stick around, Ethan noted, glancing out the window. No problem. We have time to enjoy some hot coffee, I replied. We sat by the window. The waitress brought us drinks and pastries. The conversation continued, but now it became more personal. Emily, I've wanted to ask for a while. What inspired you to become an artist? Ethan inquired. It's hard to say. I've loved drawing since childhood. It's my way of expressing what's difficult to convey with words, I shared. I understand. Music does the same for me. I looked at him and felt that indescribable tension arise between us again. Sometimes it feels like we're very similar, he said quietly. Maybe we are, I agreed, feeling my heart begin to beat faster. Silence hung between us. Outside, the rain intensified, creating a sense of isolation from the rest of the world. Emily, Ethan began, looking straight into my eyes. I can't keep pretending that nothing is happening. I averted my gaze, trying to gather my thoughts. Ethan, we shouldn't... He interrupted me gently. I know it's wrong, but my feelings for you are too strong. I can't ignore them. I sighed, feeling a mix of fear and attraction. We risk destroying everything we have, I whispered. But what if it's a chance to find what we truly want? He asked, not breaking eye contact. I looked at him, and in that moment, all doubt seemed to dissolve. The world narrowed down to this little cafe, to just the two of us. Ethan. He gently took my hand. His touch was warm and tender. Emily, I promise I'll never hurt you. I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just nodded, allowing myself to forget everything for a moment. We spent some more time in the cafe, talking about trivial things, but the atmosphere had already changed. When the rain subsided, we returned to the car. Suddenly, he pulled me close and kissed me. We moved into the car, and it happened. After that day in the town, I felt like my life was beginning to fall apart. The guilt overwhelmed me completely. I tried to avoid Ethan, reducing our conversations to polite formalities. Every time our eyes accidentally met, I felt a heavy weight on my heart. Daniel noticed the change almost immediately. Emily, are you okay? He asked one evening as we sat down for dinner. You seem distant. I tried to smile. I'm fine, just a little tired, I replied, looking away. He frowned. If something's wrong, you can tell me. I'm worried about you. Really, everything's fine, I assured him, but my voice sounded unconvincing. Over the next few days, the tension in the house grew. Ethan also seemed downcast. One day, I heard him playing a melody on the guitar that was full of sadness. The sound of the music penetrated every cell of my body, bringing tears to my eyes. I decided that I needed to try to reconnect with Daniel. I suggested having dinner together at our favorite restaurant. That's a great idea, he agreed, but there was doubt in his voice. The evening went reasonably well, but the closeness that once connected us seemed to have vanished. Our conversations were superficial, and I kept catching myself mentally drifting back to memories of Ethan. When we returned home, we found Ethan reading a book in the living room. How was your evening? He asked politely. Good, thank you, Daniel replied, sitting down in an armchair. Would you like to join us? No, thank you. I think I'll head to bed. Good night, Ethan said, and left. After he was gone, Daniel turned to me. Have you noticed that Ethan seems withdrawn too? He asked. Maybe he's stressed about school, I suggested. Could be, but I feel like something's going on in our house and I can't figure out what. I felt my heart tighten. You're overthinking it. Everything is fine, I tried to reassure him. He looked at me closely. Emily, we've been married for several years. I can tell when something's wrong. If we have a problem, let's talk about it. I lowered my eyes. I'm just stressed about my projects. Maybe I need a little time for myself. If you need support, I'm always here, he said gently. Thank you, I whispered. That night, I struggled to sleep. My thoughts swirled in my head, refusing to give me peace. I knew I was continuing to deceive Daniel with my silence, and it was only making things worse. But how could I confess what was really happening inside me? The next day, I decided to talk to Ethan. Finding a moment when we were alone, I approached him. "We need to talk," I said quietly. He nodded, looking serious. "I'm listening." "I think we should keep our distance from each other. It would be better for all of us." Ethan sighed. "I understand. I didn't mean to cause any problems. It's not your fault. The situation just got out of control. Emily, I'm truly sorry if I caused you any pain. It'll be all right. We just need time." He nodded, and in his eyes I saw a reflection of my own pain. For the next few days, we barely crossed paths. Daniel noticed the tension but didn't bring up the subject again. The atmosphere in the house felt heavy, like a thick fog had descended upon us. I realized that this couldn't go on any longer. A decision had to be made, and I had to try to regain control over my life. But at what cost? And was there a way to make things right? The questions remained unanswered, while time continued to march forward relentlessly. A few days later, the tension in the house reached its peak. Daniel had increasingly noticed my distant behavior and Ethan's withdrawn attitude. One evening, when Ethan had gone to the university library, Daniel decided to start a conversation. "Emily, we need to talk," he said seriously, entering the living room where I was trying to read a book. I set the book down and looked at him. "Of course, what did you want to talk about?" He sat down across from me, arms crossed. "I can't keep ignoring what's happening. You've changed, and so has Ethan. There's something going on between you, isn't there?" My heart froze. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Daniel, He raised his hand, stopping me. "Please, just tell me the truth. I deserve to know." I took a deep breath, gathering my strength. "You're right. I should have told you earlier. There are feelings between Ethan and me that shouldn't have developed." His face went pale, his eyes widened with shock and pain. "How could this happen?" he whispered. "He's my nephew, Emily. We're family." Tears began to well up in my eyes. I never wanted this to happen. It started with shared interests, music, art. I tried to stop it, but you didn't," he finished for me, a bitter smile on his face. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I truly am." He stood up, pacing back and forth across the room. "How long has this been going on?" "Nothing serious happened," I tried to explain, but the emotional connection became too strong. He stopped and looked at me with pain and disappointment. "An emotional connection? Do you understand that this is a betrayal? I trusted you. I trusted him." "I know, and there is no excuse for me," I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I'm willing to do anything to fix this." "Fix this?" He laughed bitterly. "How are you going to fix this?" At that moment, the door opened and Ethan walked in. He froze when he saw us. "What's going on?" he asked cautiously. Daniel turned to him, his eyes blazing with anger. "You know what's going on. Emily told me everything." Ethan went pale. "Uncle Daniel, Don't you dare call me that," he shouted. "I invited you into my home, I trusted you, and you betrayed me." Ethan lowered his head. "I'm sorry. This should never have happened." "You both betrayed me," Daniel continued, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't want to see either of you." I tried to approach him. "Please, let's talk. We can work this out." He stepped back. "No, Emily. There's nothing to discuss. Our marriage is broken. The trust is gone." Ethan raised his eyes. "I'll leave. It's the best solution. I don't want to cause any more pain." Daniel nodded. "Yes, that's the best thing you can do." Tears came rushing back. I realized I was losing both of them. "Daniel, forgive me," I whispered. He looked at me with bitterness. "Forgive?" I don't know if I can ever forgive. I need time. He left the room, leaving me and Ethan alone. Emily? Ethan began, but I raised my hand. Maybe you really should leave. It's the only way to give Daniel a chance to heal. He nodded. I'll pack my things and go today. We stood in silence, realizing that our actions had led to inevitable consequences. I hope you find your happiness, he said quietly. Ethan, take care of yourself. He went upstairs to pack. I was left alone in the empty living room, listening to the deafening silence. The house that was once filled with laughter and music had now become a place of pain and loss. Later, I tried to talk to Daniel, but he locked himself in his study, unwilling to see me. The night was restless. I couldn't sleep, thinking about how everything had fallen apart in an instant. In the morning, I found that Daniel had left for work earlier than usual, without leaving any messages. Ethan was also gone. His room was empty, as if he had never lived here. A few days later, the tension in the house reached its peak. Daniel had increasingly noticed my distant behavior and Ethan's withdrawn attitude. One evening, when Ethan had gone to the university library, Daniel decided to start a conversation. Emily, we need to talk, he said seriously, entering the living room where I was trying to read a book. I set the book down and looked at him. Of course, what did you want to talk about? He sat down across from me, arms crossed. I can't keep ignoring what's happening. You've changed, and so has Ethan. There's something going on between you, isn't there? My heart froze. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel, He raised his hand, stopping me. Please, just tell me the truth. I deserve to know. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength. You're right. I should have told you earlier. There are feelings between Ethan and me that shouldn't have developed. His face went pale, his eyes widened with shock and pain. How could this happen? He whispered. He's my nephew, Emily. We're family. Tears began to well up in my eyes. I never wanted this to happen. It started with shared interests, music, art. I tried to stop it, but you didn't, he finished for me, a bitter smile on his face. I'm sorry, Daniel, I truly am. He stood up, pacing back and forth across the room. How long has this been going on? Nothing serious happened. I tried to explain, but the emotional connection became too strong. He stopped and looked at me with pain and disappointment. An emotional connection? Do you understand that this is a betrayal? I trusted you. I trusted him. I know, and there is no excuse for me, I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. I'm willing to do anything to fix this. Fix this? He laughed bitterly. How are you going to fix this? At that moment, the door opened and Ethan walked in. He froze when he saw us. What's going on? He asked cautiously. Daniel turned to him, his eyes blazing with anger. You know what's going on. Emily told me everything. Ethan went pale. Uncle Daniel, Don't you dare call me that, he shouted. I invited you into my home. I trusted you and you betrayed me. Ethan lowered his head. I'm sorry. This should never have happened. You both betrayed me, Daniel continued, his voice trembling with emotion. I don't want to see either of you. I tried to approach him. Please, let's talk. We can work this out. He stepped back. No, Emily, there's nothing to discuss. Our marriage is broken. The trust is gone.